should we move on to? If we move on to honestly, guys, it's just our opinion now, John.
Yeah.
Should players be muzzled? And this is another aspect of this case. Should players be muzzled from commenting on the Leniu Mam case? We have had players make comment on it. Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, John. I mean...
Yeah, so obviously every Indigenous player has had a comment, Latrell Mitchell more than others, because he's the guy that's front and centre for everything to do with Indigenous players. Nico Hines brought out the Sharks Indigenous training shirt to a press conference and said, "We're with you, Ezra." Jonathan Thurston's commented, and I didn't know this until this came up, that players aren't allowed to comment on judiciary charges, actually, in the media. They're not allowed. So for careless tackles and all that kind of thing, they're not allowed because it will weight. Just like jury members aren't allowed to watch the news about their case. And what's happened now is, nobody is condoning anyone being racist. But what's happened is, even if Spencer Leniu wasn't guilty and he was come out and said, "I didn't say it, I didn't say nothing," if all these players are coming out in support of Ezra Mam's thing, it creates a guilty until proven innocent.
And that's the thing, John. Isn't the NRL judiciary it's the NRL's version of a courtroom?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to have your day in court, and in this case, you've got to have your day at the NRL judiciary. And so Leniu hasn't had his day in court yet, John, on this at the NRL judiciary.
Yeah.
And so what happened with Latrell Mitchell was Andrew Voss actually, there was a post with a quote from him suggesting Leniu could be suspended for half the season if found guilty. Latrell Mitchell wrote, "and some." Now, this hasn't been played out at the judiciary. He hasn't had his day at the NRL judiciary, and Latrell Mitchell has taken it upon himself to make comment on how long the suspension should be, John. Again, players are not supposed to make these comments on matters that haven't been played out at the judiciary. Now, if Spencer Leniu happens to be found guilty of this at the judiciary, John, Latrell Mitchell, go for it. Condemn him. Go for your life. By all means, condemn him over it. But he has not been found guilty of it yet, John, and Latrell Mitchell has gone off early in this instance. And other players, you mentioned Nico Hines, you mentioned that Cody Walker as well has come out before he's had his day at the judiciary. And so we're going down a dangerous path, John, if players are allowed to make these public comments on a matter that is that is yet to be heard at the judiciary. It's just not the correct process.
No, it's not.
Latrell Mitchell has not followed the correct process here, John. He needs to wait until Leniu's had his day at the judiciary. If he's found guilty, well, then that's your time to give it to him on social media over it. But until he's been found guilty, well, Latrell Mitchell's gone off too early there, John.
Yeah, 100%. What's going to happen if he doesn't get a, whatever it was, 12-week suspension and then some?
But what happens if he's found not guilty, John? And Latrell Mitchell said this about him on social media. Nico Hines and Cody Walker have come out and spoken out against him as well. There's the possibility that he'll be found not guilty, John. There is that possibility at this stage, and if he is, well, it's not going to look very favourably upon Latrell Mitchell if he's found not guilty, John.
Yeah, 100%. And any of them, not just Latrell Mitchell.
Yeah, Cody Walker and Nico Hines as well.
And then other media. So when a player gets a reckless or careless or whatever high tackle or, lifting above the horizontal and all that kind of thing, media pundits will jump in, right? They do. Players aren't allowed to. This is no different, even though it's not a physical charge. It's a judiciary charge. So Latrell Mitchell posted straight after the game or whatever. Straight away. Like, he already did one post straight after the game or not long after it, next day or whatever. And that should have been shut down. But the fact that it wasn't left it open for everyone else to be allowed to give their comments, all other players. Now, active players, they're not allowed to comment on judiciary matters. They're just not. That's it.
Yeah. And that post you mentioned from Latrell Mitchell, that was where he came out and said, well, the NRL better deal with this shit. That was the quote from Latrell Mitchell. And then he added that extra comment on that post from Andrew Voss.
Yeah, so Latrell Mitchell's saying something when he's technically not allowed to and not getting in any trouble for it meant that Nico Hines and Cody Walker and a few other players felt that, like, oh, we're allowed to say something about this one. So what's the line now? You know, what is the line that where you're allowed to talk about things in front of the judiciary and you're not? What's the line? They're also not allowed to talk about things in front of the integrity committee and stuff like that. So when Mitch Kennedy talks about Boxing Day lines, they're not meant to comment on that either. What's the line now? So if some player gets filmed doing a racist remark against something against somebody outside of the match, right? Then it goes through the integrity committee as opposed to the judiciary and then all that stuff. Are players allowed to comment on that? They've set a precedent in which players are allowed to comment on any, starts with the racism, but goes to any non-physical thing. So what's the line? NRL has to clarify the rule then, because if you're allowed to comment on stuff like that, then why aren't I allowed to comment on swinging arms? Why? Like, what is the justification for me being allowed to comment on this, or a player being allowed to comment this and a player not being allowed to comment on that? Because the rule is, from my understanding, they're not allowed to comment on things that are in front of the
judiciary.
Charged.
Yeah.
Referred to the judiciary or charged. So this is referred straight to the judiciary, so they're not allowed to comment. That's just it. They're not allowed to comment.
Is there going to be action taken against these players for making a comment?
Exactly.
On
because as soon as it went on report, right, because that was what it was. Ezra made a formal complaint. It went on report. Arms went over the head in the X. It's on report. You're not allowed to comment. That's what the rule is. Players aren't allowed to comment. And then Latrell Mitchell does a social media post, and everyone goes, oh, we are allowed to comment on this one, so we will. And it should have been shut down immediately. Now, what is the NRL doing? Is it because it's Latrell Mitchell and he's a protected species? Is it... why isn't more media commenting on the fact that it's that they're breaking the rules? I understand the sensitivities of the issue. Okay, I totally understand there are sensitivities around it, but that doesn't mean you can undo due process.
Yeah, as we say, if he happens to be found guilty, go for it. Condemn him. Go for it. Call him out. That's your time to make comment on social media about it.
Exactly.
Not when the outcome of the judiciary hearing is unknown. And it is unknown at this point in time. We need to wait for Leniu to have his say at the judiciary hearing on Tuesday. And then once we reach a verdict, well then we go to the next course. You know, we make our determinations.
And what direction does it go after the judiciary? Okay, you have two directions, right? For if he was found not guilty. Either these players then have to apologise, or they'll double down, and they'll say, are they allowed to say like, oh, the NRL system is bullshit or something like that? You know, are they allowed to? Are they going to get fined for that? Because you're also not allowed to criticise the NRL. You know, players aren't allowed to criticise the NRL and stuff like that. They get pinged for that, right? Bringing the game into disrepute. So I don't expect Spencer Leniu to be found not guilty in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, but if he was, does Nico Hines, Cody Walker, and Latrell Mitchell step forward and say, sorry, man, like I was wrong? Or do they double down and go, this is bullshit? And then, you know, obviously Spencer Leniu is getting special treatment. And then what happens? It should have been nipped in the bud straight away. As soon as Latrell Mitchell puts up a post, the NRL should have contacted him and said, take that post down. You have to take that post down. Also, if you don't take it down, we're going to give you a fine. Once it's all done in 2 weeks, then have at you.
Is it fair to say the NRL are just too scared to do that, John?
Of course, absolutely, because it is such a sensitive issue. Yeah. And I would expect that I would think that more media would be commenting on it, but they're just not.
They're too scared as well, John. They're too scared.
So, yes, players should be muzzled from commenting on the Leniu case, I think. That's just my opinion, honestly, guys.
So it should follow the same process as any other judiciary matter, a high tackle, a crusher tackle, a spear tackle, whatever.
Exactly.
It's a judiciary matter, so we wait and we hold off on making our comments on the matter until that judiciary hearing has played out.
Exactly.
And we've reached a verdict in it, and we are not at that point yet. We won't be until Tuesday night at the conclusion of that hearing.
Yes, 100%. So that's honestly, guys, it's just our opinion. There is some more news discussion around this. Leading defence lawyer has said Leniu won't be faced criminal or civil charges due to America's strict freedom of speech rights.
Yes.
I think it's more to do with the fact that they don't understand. Because if you imagine in an NFL player, an NFL game, if a player had have called an African American player that worst ever slur ever, what would happen then? I just think it's because they just don't understand.
This leading defence lawyer, Adam Solinger, works for the respected Schaus Law Group in Nevada. Well, he said it's because of America's strict freedom of speech rights that Leniu won't be criminally or civilly charged, John. Solinger said, typically crimes during a sporting match aren't necessarily defended because it's during a sporting match. Just the use of the racial slur alone during a match wouldn't subject him, Leniu, to any legal threat. There's no crime because the only speech that we necessarily punish in Nevada and the United States in general would be threats. So if you're threatening somebody, that could be construed as an assault. Now, an argument, I continue to quote Solinger here, John. Now, an argument can be made in some places that the use of racial slurs is offensive enough that it's like a threat. But unless it's followed up with a direct call to action, I threaten to beat you up, for example, it's not a crime.
Yeah, that's what
Solinger has said.
If it had been the N-word, it would have been a issue. But because they just don't understand that...
Yeah, well, Solinger said he won't face civil action either. He says, and I quote, "We also have civil laws to deal with speech, but you're pretty much allowed to say almost anything," Solinger said.
Yeah, it's not Canada where you're not allowed to say anything. But yeah, I fully reckon it's more to do with the fact that they just don't understand, because in America, the main thing is African-American slurs. And like I said, in an NFL match, if it had been some dude saying the N-word to another dude, they probably would have faced like complete ban, everything. But yeah, like that's just the severe thing. But you can even see from now, because I'm saying the N-word and I will say monkey. Like, it's just the severity of it, really. There's no civil charges or criminal charges because they don't see it as severe. Americans don't see it as severe because they don't understand. They just don't understand the Aboriginal slurs and stuff like that. We can finish up now with the bloody Spencer Leniu.
Yeah, it's...